In this video, I'm going to explain how to use spreadsheet software. A spreadsheet is just a giant table, a digital table, where the columns are named with letters, A, B, C, etc. The rows are named with numbers, 1, 2, 3, etc. Each intersection of a row and a column, each box that I'm highlighting here, we call a cell, C-E-L-L. Each cell has an address. The address of this cell is D3. Here's A1. Here's F6, etc. So the very simplest thing that I can do is a spreadsheet. And it doesn't matter if I'm using Google Sheets, which I am now, I'm using Microsoft Excel, Apple Numbers, they all work the same way, is to store data. So I could type in numbers directly into the cells, and I could store that data in my spreadsheet. I could also type in words, combinations of letters and numbers, so I can store whatever I want. What we are going to use them for, though, is that spreadsheets are very powerful at automating or replicating simple calculations quickly. Much simpler, much faster than we can do by hand or with a calculator. So for example, I'm going to show you the Fibonacci sequence. You may have seen this before. The first two terms are 1 and 1. To get the next term in the sequence, I add the previous two. So 1 plus 1 is 2. Then I would add 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5. I'm always adding the previous two numbers. 3 plus 5 is 8, 5 plus 8 is 13. So I'm just doing that by hand. I'm adding the numbers. The speed that I can do that is limited by how fast I can type. With bigger numbers, I might have to use pencil and paper or a calculator, so it can be time consuming. A spreadsheet is going to be able to automate that process really quickly. So if I want to instruct a spreadsheet to do something, I'm going to type in a formula into the cells instead of just a number. To start a formula, I have to start by typing in equal. So I can either click on the cell and just type directly in it, or I can click on the cell and then type up here in the formula bar that starts with FX. So we're always going to start with equals to get the spreadsheet ready to take an instruction. And I'm going to say add the two previous numbers. I'm not just going to say 1 plus 1. It would give me 2. It works as a calculator. But that's not going to help me automate anything. Instead, I'm going to say add whatever values are in these two cells. So I'm going to say equals B2 plus B3. Add whatever is in those cells. Why does this automate? Well, I can drag that formula down, copy it down, so that in each cell is always adding whatever is in the two cells above. So the quickest way to do that, I could do Control-C for copy and then paste it wherever I want, or I could just grab the bottom right corner of the cell, drag it down. That's going to copy the formula, and there in no time at all, in some number of milliseconds, I've generated the first 42 terms of the Fibonacci sequence. Each time, and I can show this by clicking inside a cell, it's just telling you to add 2 cells above plus 1 cell above to get the next number. So I've automated the process. It's much faster. So in the rest of this video, I'm going to apply that idea of using formulas to automate calculations to what we've been learning in this course, which is simple and compound interest. So let's look at a simple interest case first. So when we have simple interest, I'm looking at how much I invest, the principal, let's say $5,000, in an annual interest rate. Let's say 5%. I could type in 0.05, but Google Sheets will read that 5% anyway as a decimal, 0.05. And I want to look at how much money I have in my bank account if I leave that money there at 5% simple interest for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, up to 20 years. So I'm going to start in year 1, and then I want to go up to year 20. Instead of typing in 2 to 20, I'm going to automate that as well. So I'll say equals whatever is in the cell above, B6, and then just add 1. If I drag it down, it's going to keep adding 1 to the number above. And I'm going to drag that down until I get to 20. So I can either drag it down with my mouse. I can also just highlight and type Control-D, and it will copy it down. D, I think, stands for down. So now we can find how much money I have at the end of each year. So the formula that you've learned in class is that A, the amount of money you have, is equal to your initial principal plus your interest. And the interest is P times the rate R times the number of years T. And that's going to give me the amount after any given amount of time. So let's translate that into a Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets formula. I'm going to type equals principal 5,000 plus principal again 5,000 times the rate. I'm going to use Shift-8 to make the asterisk. That's how we do multiply in Google Sheets. Times 5%, 0.05, times the number of years, which is 1. So you notice in this formula, you can see in the formula bar, I'm not typing any numbers. I'm just typing in an instruction of what to do with the inputs. And so after 1 year, I have $5,250. Now I want to drag that formula down, but I always want to be referencing the same principal and the same interest. So I'm going to lock those references, lock those addresses. So if I click again in that formula bar, I'm going to put a $ in front of the 2 to say I always want to look to the second row. A $ in front of the 3, I always want to look to the third row. So when I drag it down, I'm not dragging down those addresses with me. I'm not going to lock B6 because when I drag it down, I do want to access different addresses for the year. I want to access B7 next, then B8, then B9. So now, when I copy down this formula for my 20 years, it's going to very quickly figure out how much money I have in my account after each year. If I click on any of these formulas, you notice that I'm still accessing the locked cells C2 and C3, but B9 is a relative reference or a relative address. It's going to adjust as I move down my spreadsheet. We can do a couple things to make this look nicer. If I want to change this to currency, I can reformat it. I can change the number of decimal places. Often, the convention in spreadsheet is to make inputs blue. So anytime you type a number directly, let's put it in blue. I've only typed 3 numbers in directly. The first year, which is 1, the amount of principal and the interest rate. And then I can adjust those inputs, and everything else is a formula. It's going to recalculate automatically. So if instead I want to invest $8,000, it all adjusts automatically. If I want to change my interest rate to 8.2%, it's going to adjust and recalculate. That's the power of the spreadsheet. What would take us, 20 minutes by hand, we can do instantaneously. I could also change the first year to year 8, and it's going to calculate that as well. So let's go back to our original parameters, $5,000 principal, 8% interest, or 5% interest, I think we started with. The other example that I'm going to show is just compound interest. We've done this in the course as well. Compound interest still takes a principal input, let's say $5,000, an interest rate annually of 5%, but we also need to know the number of compounding periods per year. So let's compound monthly, so I'm going to have 12 periods per year. Those are my 3 inputs. We've learned in class, I'll just type it in here, our formula for compound interest, the amount that you have equals the principal multiplied by 1 plus I divided by n, the interest rate divided by the number of periods, to the power of n times t, which would be the number of periods times the number of years. So I want to translate that math formula into something that my spreadsheet can understand. And I'm going to do it without typing in any numbers, but just by referencing my cells that have the locations. So I'm going to do principal times, I have to write in that asterisk, open bracket, 1 plus the interest rate divided by the number of compounding periods. I'm going to close my bracket. I'm going to raise that to the power. Whoops. I'm doing this all in the formula bar. I want to raise it to the power, so shift 6 of the number of compounding periods times the number of years. And that's going to get me how much money I have after 1 year. So if you notice, and again, I can change that to money if I'd like. If you notice, after 1 year, I only get a few more dollars from all this compounding. But over time, compound interest will grow much quicker because I'm constantly recalculating the amount of interest I earn. Now again, as I drag down the formula, I want to lock a lot of these inputs. I always want to use the same principal, the same interest rate, the same number of periods, so I'm going to lock all of those addresses. So I'm always pulling from the second row or the third row or the fourth row. Again, I'm not going to lock the number of years because that's what's going to change in each formula. So now I'm going to drag that down, and we can notice that at the end of the 20 years, I actually have a lot more money through compound interest. And again, these inputs, maybe I'll put in the color blue. If I want to see, well, what changes with a lower interest rate, I can look at that instantaneously. What happens if I compound weekly? It's going to change everything again really quickly. So computers are very good at doing simple things quickly. Humans are good at doing complex things slowly. So I've had to code in the formula, but once I've done that, the computer can recalculate everything really quickly. The last thing I'll show in this video, we can also drag formulas sideways. Let's say I wanted to look at another example. Let's say I want to see, well, what happens if I have $7,000, 3% interest rate, and it compounds semi-annually, so twice a year. What I can do is drag over this formula. Now it's going to give me some crazy number. The problem is, what's gone wrong is that I didn't lock the column A. So I still want to reference the column A to get the first year. So what I can do instead here is I can lock that column. I guess it's column B is where the years are. So I put the $ in front of the B. Now when I drag it over, the dollar sign means it's going to stay at B. It's not going to adjust. So now when I drag it over, if I click in this formula, it is referencing all the cells I want it to reference. I've only locked the column, not the row, so when I drag down, it will adjust the amount of time, as I do here. So that's a 10-minute video, starting from scratch, how to use spreadsheet software. In this course, we will use Google Sheets. I think some of the challenging things is how to make sure that you're getting the right reference, the right address, which we can use by using that dollar symbol to lock in either the row, the column, or both. And then I can drag the formula down or to the right, however I'd like. If you have any questions, please send me an email. In the next video, I'm going to graph these situations and so that we can analyze it in a visual way. All right, thanks for watching.